Good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm with Maine Woodland Owners. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach, and I'm thrilled to have this group here. This is probably, I believe, our first webinar in our online video series for the fall season of 2022. And today we are going to be focusing on what happens once you've bought your woods. This is a program to help folks who are just getting into woodland ownership and aren't quite sure if they're taking the right first steps, maybe already taken some initiatives on your property, but you'd like to get some reassurance that you're on the right track, or you've just bought your woods and you really don't know what's next. All those things will be addressed tonight. We have two terrific presenters. Jeff Williams, who is a member of the board of directors of Maine Woodland Owners. He is also a consulting forester based in Leamington. Leamington, yes. And has worked with clients for over 10 years, has been mentored by a wonderful forester who's no longer with us now, who had been the board chair of our organization. And he has terrific advice for the newer woodland owner, and he's ready to present what he knows. And this is also a chance for people to ask questions. So I believe, Jeff, you're fine with people asking questions during your presentation, and
absolutely.
I think this will be an active dialogue. So Jeff,
you can either write it in the chat or
and then
feel free to interrupt or write it in the chat.
Yep. And so you can write it in the chat box. You can put your hand up. I'll be watching for everybody, seeing if anybody's got any question, or you can just jump right in. You can unmute and just jump in and ask your question. We also have Tom Doak. He's our executive director at Maine Woodland Owners. He's been a licensed forester for over 30 years, I believe. Was the director of the Forest Service at one point, and has been with Maine Woodland Owners almost 20 years, and is a fantastic resource. Maine Woodland Owners is proud to provide these types of services to woodland owners. We have people calling in asking for advice. That's what we're here for. We have if you're not a member, just to let you know, we do have a monthly newsletter, 20-page newsletter. I'm the editor of the newsletter. So these types of interactions that we have with our members and supporters and woodland owners give me a lot of ideas about what needs to be in our newsletter to make it a useful resource. So I'm happy for the exchange and the interactions, and we're, again, very glad to have everybody here. If you've just arrived, go ahead and mute yourself, and we open up your chat box and type in a message saying hello and where you're calling from. And like I said, please feel free to ask questions on your chat box or jump in with questions as we go along. We want to make sure that everybody's getting what they need tonight. I'm going to pass it on to Jeff. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with your slideshow, and let us start our program.
All right. Well, first off, thanks to everybody who is here tonight. Appreciate you spending your time with us. So my expertise is I'm a consulting forester. I work with primarily private woodland owners, people like yourselves who have either recently purchased or maybe owned for a little bit longer, but haven't thought about their woodlot until they have some more time in their lives to really start thinking about what's out behind their house, or what they've inherited or something like that. So you have woods. What's next? Next slide, Jen. Actually, I might be actually able to share it myself. Hang on, give me 1 sec. That way I can advance it.
Oh.
Can you see that now?
It's just showing your screen. You got to go ahead and click on your slideshow window. You got it.
How about now?
That looks right. And
All right.
You're able to advance it?
So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Terrific.
All right. So one of the first things I tell people, or I ask people, is whether or not they know where their actual property boundary is. Many people purchase land, they purchase it not necessarily sight unseen, but they don't always walk all of the boundaries to know exactly where the monumentation is and where the property lines are. So one of the first things I do with people, or I encourage them to do, is to go out and look for their boundaries, look for their corners, look for any obvious indicators if they don't know where their boundaries are. Maybe start at a point near the road that you're familiar with, and try and look for some blazes, paint. Oftentimes red is used as boundaries. I've seen orange, blue, a number of other colors, but red is the most common. Look for barbed wire, maybe an old plow line on a field, old ribbon or flagging that might indicate somebody had previously surveyed, or a forester maybe has been along that old boundary. And then oftentimes you'll find larger trees along boundary lines. So if you're in an area of a young forest, but you see some larger trees off in the distance, maybe go investigate those and see if that's where they fall on the boundary line, because often those are left when two parcels are harvested up to the edge. Another thing you can look for is different age. So if there was a harvest nearby your property, you can look to see where that harvest ended, and you'll often find a boundary line up against your line. So just the top corner is a cross-sectional area of the tree, of how it's blazed on a boundary line. If the line intersects, like tree A, you'll see blazes on each face of that tree where the property line actually intersects the tree. The tree labeled B is a tree that is off of that boundary line, so the blaze would be on the side of the tree facing towards the boundary line. Oftentimes you'll find markers. Some properties are well marked, others are not. It all depends on what was done in the past for your property described by your deed. Just a variety of markers here shown that I've run into in the recent past. Upper left corner is a survey marker with a aluminum cap. More commonly, you'll find the middle upper picture there with the plastic cap, often chewed on by porcupine or whatever else. Rebar to the right, and then down below, large metal pipe, granite monuments with drill holes. One thing that has eluded a lot of people in my experience is stone walls with drill holes. You often won't look for them because they're so small and they're drilled into some small field stone that's set in that wall. That's pretty common. And then to the right of that is just a boundary blaze showing some old paint as an indicator. This next slide I include, this may be a bit more advanced for new owners, but it's something to consider, because when you purchase property, you have often looked at the tax map to know where your property is in regards to the town. Those maps are widely used by realtors and included in your purchasing packet when you buy a piece of land. So to the right is the tax map. Outlined in red is the property. And the reason I included this is because if you look at the map to the left here, in the lower left corner, each corner is numbered. So between 22, 21, back to 18, that'd be the southwest corner of that property. You can see that it's not the same as what's shown on the tax map. And this is quite often the case. I tell people to just use tax maps as a guide. They're not survey quality. They're not going to be what you find on the ground, but they'll give you a good start of where to look. The other reason I included this is because you can see all of these gray lines on this map are stone walls on this property. And this is an old farm. I'm tracing them here. You can see, and oftentimes you'll find walls internally, but then you'll find walls that go around the entire property based on the old line. And oftentimes where you end up where a wall may have ended, it's either a wetland like here to the left, or you'll find old fencing where they put barbed wire in a section of area that was not a stone wall. That's quite common also. So here we have just an arbitrary deed. Every property that's purchased, you'll likely have a deed, whether or not it is a quick claim or warranty deed. Some have meets and bounds, some don't. They'll reference other deeds that do. But if your property has a deed with meets and bounds mentioned, you can get into understanding your deed and finding where the beginning point is, and then trying to map it out, either in the forest or on paper first, so you have a reference. But they often give you a distance. Here it's 1,235 feet southwesterly, and then you can start to build your property on paper and know what you're looking for when it comes to the forest if you don't have a survey. Another tool I encourage new landowners to use quite often is Google Earth. Google Earth is a free download on a laptop or any kind of tablet, but you can use this to find old stone walls. Like here in this imagery, there's an old stone wall running right down through here, and if you look closely, you can see kind of a darker line in this hardwood stand. It's quite easy in hardwood, but you can see there's an old stone wall that runs up through here, and then you can reference that with the measurement tool on Google Earth, and that'll give you a point to look for where your property may end if you know the distance. Just preparation work you can do ahead of time if you're not familiar with your boundaries. Another tool people use, I use it quite often. Again, it's not very accurate, but it's OnX Hunt up top here, is the name of that app. It's available for Android, iPhone, tablets, but it's a mobile app that you would use to go out on your property. The blue circle here in the center would be your indication or location, and then the red lines shown on the map are tax parcel data. So as you move throughout your property, it'll give you your location roughly in regards to where the tax parcel property lines would be. Maybe not what your actual property lines are, but they might get you in the neighborhood. Another thing I tell people is just go out and spend time in your forest. Even if you're not familiar with all the property lines, you know generally where your lot is. Go out and maybe walk trails that are old skid trails or old trails of previous owners, and just become familiar with the topography of the land. One thing foresters use are contour lines to really become familiar with the land. So here you can see, before knowing that there's contour on this property, it just looks flat. But then you add contour lines and you see the topography of it. You can see that there's a really steep outcrop here that slopes out towards this large wetland that's open and flat because there are no contours. So you can tell which way the land is sloping. You can get a general sense of if you're on the land, you know, you're walking out your back line, you should start hitting a steeper slope that heads west, and become familiar with that as you're out using the land. And same here, if you were headed over to the southwest, you'd know you'd come up over a hill. Here, there's a steeper slope here, and then it heads again west towards the wetland. And then you can become, go ahead.
So you got the contour map. How did you get that map?
This map is from state data, but any topography map, you could outline your own property on a topography map. You can purchase topography maps online or just use something local. But this is from the state office of GIS, and you can upload those also on Google Earth, also topography lines. So I just used the topography to show where the intermittent streams are on the property, another indicator of location. And then I added here just stone walls also. So again, if you have old trails, get out and walk those trails, become familiar with them. Start to understand what you have in your woodlot in terms of trees. Maybe not species is not maybe as important as just size and density. And one question I get asked a lot when I work with new owners is, one question I ask them is what they want out of their woods long term, to start to think about what makes them happy about their woodlot. Because a lot of foresters talk in terms of density, stalking, species composition, stands, and these oftentimes don't mean a whole lot to the new owner, because they're more just familiar with aesthetics and maybe some certain key features about their woods that they have come to know and come to like. So once you become familiar with the actual lay of your land, regardless of what the timber is or what the trees are, again, consider what's important to you. Think about the future and what you'd like to see. And at that point, I think it's probably time to get ready to call a consulting forester or find a consulting forester in your area that shares your values and understands your goals. Maybe not the first one you call. It's okay to call a few of them and meet with a few of them. Most good foresters won't charge you to come out and walk your property for an hour and talk with you and outline their services and their fees and talk about their history, their experience, and what they see on your lot. So I would think after spending some time on the lot and understanding what you have, or maybe just becoming familiar with what you have, it'd be a good step to give a forester a call. At that point, they will likely encourage you to get a forest management plan written. And one important conversation to have with a forester is your level of understanding of forestry, because the plan can be tailored towards your level of knowledge. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for you to have stalking curves of a white pine pole stand if you don't know a white pine or size indications like that. So that's an important conversation to have, so that what you're paying for makes sense to you and is enjoyable to read and digestible. There are a number of cost share or grant opportunities in the state to provide partial funding for a forest plan. I'll talk about those in just a minute here. But having a management plan written to achieve your goals, and that's the most important one. A lot of foresters work to write plans towards what you want to achieve out of your forest. I wish all of them would, but so cost share opportunities for forest management plans. Most common, most widely used would be the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They have field offices designated by county across the state, and they have a program called the Environmental Quality Incentive Program for forest plans. It's a lot of alphabet soup with that organization, but if you find your local field office just by Googling NRCS and then your town, you can give them a call and talk with them and just say you're looking to have a forest management plan written, and they will help you down that road to get funding and then to find the right forester for you that can write that plan. The other program that's widely used in the state of Maine is the Woods-Wise program through the Maine Forest Service. They also have cost share funding. Their program is not quite as comprehensive. They are widely used for tree growth plans. If your land is enrolled in the current use program tree growth, they will fund a plan that will satisfy that requirement. Obviously, it's not the full cost for that plan quite often, but it's a partial reimbursement for the cost of that plan. But it's a great program. It's not put on, but it's overseen by district foresters. So it'll help you develop a relationship with your local district forester, which would be the state arm of forestry. So the Maine Forest Service, the representative in your county that will be helpful to you. So that's the end of the slideshow. Let me see if I can get out of it here. So generally, I encourage people to spend time in their woodlot, get to know your boundaries, become familiar with your trails, become familiar with the topography of your lot. I don't think right out of the gate, knowing your forest in terms of trees and species and density and all that stuff is overly important. I think that's, once you have a plan, I think that becomes more important to understand to achieve your goals. But I think getting to know the land prior to calling a forester and getting a written plan is most important. Tom says, you might want to give an estimate of a management plan cost. That's a good point, Tom. So tree growth plans are usually cheaper if you're, well, I should say Woods-Wise plans. So if you don't require a timber inventory, if it's just a general plan of what's there and how to achieve your goals with it, The plan will be considerably less expensive than if you hire a forester to also inventory the standing timber and give you a volume and value. The NRCS forest plan covers that. They require an inventory in the plan. And I believe WoodsWise does require some type of inventory, but I have to update myself on that. But it's a lot of what costs the time for the inventory in a forest plan. But I would say on an average 50-acre parcel, your plan cost should be anywhere from probably about $600 up to maybe $1,500 if you're getting into the NRCS side of things, which is a very comprehensive plan that covers all aspects. The inventory thing is maybe not as necessary when you're first starting out, but it can be helpful because then it becomes a useful tool for deciding harvest volumes and understanding how much value is in your woodlot in terms of forest products. It can also be helpful to establish a cost basis of your land when you do harvest timber. You pay long-term capital gains on that timber. So it's useful to help establish a cost basis and determine your tax liability, even if that's 10, 15 years down the road, or even longer than that. But if you have that inventory from year one, you can do a lot of that work 20 years down the road and save yourself some time and money. But again, a forest plan should be something that you want, and it should answer questions that you have and give you guidance on your long-term objectives of the property. And it should give you some steps in year XYZ, say 5 years, the first 5 years, this is what you should be focusing on, give you some action items to do. And then at year 10, what should you have accomplished? What should you be looking towards to accomplish at that point? But again, I think it's less important right out of the gate. If you just bought your property, get out and understand it, find your boundaries, mark your boundaries. If you're comfortable with your boundaries and you know you have a survey, you can get out there and actually blaze your property or reblaze if it's already been done, and repaint those lines. I think that's a helpful activity for new owners also. Anybody have any questions at this point? It doesn't have to be related to new ownership. If you just have a burning question on your mind, feel free to ask it. You can either unmute
Jeff,
or write in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, I could add a couple things. I think as a forester, I can tell you I 100% agree with Jeff about talking to multiple foresters, and you're looking for one that listens to you and asks you what you care about your property, not the one that comes and says, well, this is what we're going to do. The first step of a good forester, frankly, is to listen to the landowner, what they really care about, what's their real interest, and then help that landowner through their advice, because there are many, many ways to do things. And so looking for a forester that can listen. And I always tell people to talk to 2 or 3. And frankly, one of the services that we can provide you is we can help you identify really good foresters that work in your and live in your area or work in your area. So we don't get, we have no connection to these folks, but I can help you sort through the suggestions on a forester that would be fit. The thing when we deal with landowners, the most common regret I hear from a landowner is, I wish I'd gotten started earlier on doing something. And many of them are really afraid. If you're a new landowner, it can be overwhelming. So they just don't do anything. And doing a little bit, starting something and just getting comfortable with it, it's perfectly fine. But most people find that they regret that they put off those kind of getting involved and thinking about it too long. And you may be not caring about, you may care more about wildlife than anything else, but there's foresters and other people can help you with that too. But many people are afraid to do anything. And that's, as I say, that's, I'd say that's, one of the biggest regrets. And then on the management plans, the other thing I would say would be, Jeff gave us a pretty good range in management plan costs. But if there's those cost share programs offset a substantial amount of that money. Sometimes pretty close to 100%. So if you can sign up for a program and it will pay a substantial amount and does give you a good guide about what you have and then what you need to think about, and it's a good guide. So plan's always a good thing to have, to be honest with you, and it shouldn't be that wildly expensive if you sign up for one of the programs that'll help you defer some of the costs.
We got a question in the chat here, Tom, that says, is there a way to find out what harvests have been done on the land in the past? And we have found very overgrown logging roads and are curious when that may have been done. There is a tool on Google Earth where you can go back through the history of aerial imagery. And I use this. It's useful for maybe the last 30 years, any more than that, and it just becomes a big blur and you can't quite see anything. But I think talking with your district forester, having them out and looking at some of the age of the stumps and maybe the current stand that's there could give you some clues as to when those harvests were done. Forests are really good forest archaeologists in the sense of understanding what has been done to the land prior to your ownership and trying to decipher maybe some of the activities that were done, whether it be farming, liquidation harvests, or just a responsible management over time. But certainly another thing I would encourage new owners, if you are a bookworm and want to understand the history of your land, reading The Forested Landscape is a fantastic book to start with. I believe it's Thomas Wessel's. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a really good one to start with. It can give you some clues of what to look for on the land, of past land use, and certainly some old logging and things like that, or maybe some natural disturbances that may have occurred in the past. But that's a great one to start with.
Yeah, there's also some very simple things you can do if you're interested in how long ago that was harvested. If you've got pine trees, a perfect example, easy ones that the growth on a pine tree is the distance between the whorl of branches every year. So if you're looking at a young pine tree that's 20 feet tall, you can count the number of whorls of branches down and have a pretty good idea that tree was generated probably a couple of years before it started to really show the whorls of branches. But there's a few things like that a forester would look at and say, oh, I can tell you, within 3 to 4 years, right? Jeff, you could walk in and say, within 3 or 4 years, I can tell you within 3 or 4 years the date of the harvest here. Those kind of
pine's a great one to use
just
because of that.
just by looking at the younger trees. So
yeah, the nature of the whorls and how it grows. We got another question here. What is a good interval between land inventory and revised plans? Most foresters write on 10-year increments for forest plans. So once you have one, they're good for 10 years. Inventory is more subjective. A lot of people inventory when they first have a plan written, and then maybe after a cut in the future. So if you didn't cut in the first 10 years, you don't maybe need another inventory because you can estimate what your growth was over that time. But then if you cut in the next 10, maybe at year 20 from the beginning, it might be a good idea to have a new inventory done. But other than that, I think inventory is something that's helpful early on, and you can manipulate that in a spreadsheet to really understand what's growing. And a forester obviously can help you do that. Maybe not so much a landowner, but I don't think it's necessary every 10 years.
And the one of the big advantages of an inventory early on is Jeff had mentioned basis, and we do a whole thing on taxes, so we won't talk that much about taxes tonight because that's it can be complicated. But just know that part of the income from a timber harvest on federal income tax is a long-term capital gain, not ordinary income. So you're gonna, if you can establish your basis and what you're gonna take, if you pay $1,000 an acre for land, or it's worth $1,000 when you acquire it, you say how much of that is in the timber and how much is in that in the land, and then you need that information for your tax purposes, because any gain on the volume of your trees is long-term capital gain on federal income tax. So most people pay too much in income tax, to be honest with you, because they don't understand how how it works, but we can help you with that kind of thing too if you get into a tax situation.
If you feel like the information that I'm providing or Tom providing is a little beyond you even, and you've just bought land, you're unfamiliar with even tree species, I would start with the Forest Trees of Maine. It's a publication from the Maine Forest Service that is very good. It has every tree you'll find in your woodlot, a picture of the bark, a picture of the leaves, and it'll set you down the road to being able to be a pro at identifying trees. And that's a good place to start also, just becoming familiar with species after you know your land.
Jeff, let me take that snowmobile one, the snowmobile question. Do you see that one?
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't see that one.
So David mentions, it says there's a snowmobile trail that goes through my property on an old logging road. The trail needs maintenance, especially the wetland area, and is financial assistance available for this? And are the snowmobilers required to protect the wetland? So, first of all, the snowmobile trail on your land is your decision whether you even want it there. So if you don't want it there, it doesn't have to be there. But if you're, and I'm assuming that other people are using it here by this question. So if it's a designated trail, the local club you should have an agreement with the local club for use for this trail, and that should spell out what can be done on that trail. And there's a pretty standard language that the clubs have. They also have liability insurance that would cover you in case of somebody's injured. There's a really good liability law in Maine. We can talk about that if you have a question about it. But the trick would be to talk to the local club, snowmobile club, and then you can decide if you want it, if you want the trail or not. But if there's something not right with the trail, then the club should be responsible for fixing it. Most of the time, the landowner is not the one doing the work. You would require the club to bring it up to a certain standard. If you want to know where the club is, if you call the Maine Snowmobile Association and tell them what the town you're in, they can put you in touch with the right person for the local club. But they should be reaching out to you, frankly, but that doesn't always happen, particularly with a new owner, and they don't know the land changes hands.
So on the second part of that question, Tom, they ask if financial assistance is available for this. And one benefit of the Natural Resources Conservation Service Forest Plan is that you can then reapply once your plan is complete for implementation of projects. And there's a variety of projects, whether it be forest stand improvement projects, access control, i.e. gates. They pay for trail work around water, so that would certainly qualify here. They'll pay for permanent structures like rock crossings or actual bridges, timber bridges. So there's a variety of benefits in terms of going through the Natural Resources Conservation Service and having a plan. It gives you the opportunity to then apply for additional grant funding for those type of projects. Following question here, Tom, when will the next tax session be offered again? Usually those are tax season, right?
They usually after the first of the year. Jen, I'm assuming will line those up. Jen Hicks will.
Yeah, usually they happen in February and March. Probably, we'll hopefully have two, and they'll be on. Well, we may have an in-person session, but we have been doing them online.
So we have a member who was a retired forester from the IRS that does this for us, and is really very good at explaining it. And he is also available for a pretty nominal fee if you have if you need detailed assistance. If you're a member, he gives you a lot of free advice and only charges when he has to put a lot of time into it. So, but watch, if you're a member, what we'll be publicizing those and on our website as well. The difference between tree growth and open space. Do you want me to take that, Jeff, or do you want it?
Yeah, you are the expert here. Why don't you?
So the tree growth, they're both current use taxation programs. They're designed to tax your land at a current use instead of its full development potential. So it has these programs. Both of these programs have an ability to save you a substantial amount of money on property taxes. They can also, however, cost you a lot if you don't follow the rules. So the penalties not complying can be pretty harsh. The tree growth one is always a better reduction, frankly, in your taxes, but you have to have a forest, you have to have 10 acres of forested land. You have to have a management plan prepared by a licensed forester. You have to commit to following that plan. And you have to say that, you know, your primary use of the land is growing trees for commercial harvest at some point. So if you're not ever interested in harvesting trees, this isn't your program. And again, there's a management plan that has to be updated every 10 years. And you can't develop it on the property, the part that you put in. If you change your mind and want to develop it, you can take the land out, but there's a penalty, a pretty substantial penalty. But that, just to give you an idea what a tax rate would be, in the tree growth tax law program, it would be somewhere between $300 and $500 an acre would be the tax value. So if your land is valued at $1,000 an acre, you could probably save half Jeff's smiling, so you could probably save about half in your taxes. But there's restrictions that come with it. The open space program, and again, the state sets the rate. So that's it. The state says that's the rate, and it's no more than it will be no more than $500 an acre. Open space is a little different. It takes the full value of your property and then it discounts it by a percentage depending on things you choose, like if you want to keep your land open to the public, if it's permanently protected from development, those kind of things. If you have a management plan for the property, those kind of things. It's simpler, but it's not as good a reduction. But you don't have to have a management plan, and you don't have to ever cut trees. So, and you can move between the two if you choose. So I can help you with those, or we can certainly help you with any of those if you're thinking about it. But any licensed forester in Maine, and I should mention, foresters are licensed in Maine. If someone says they're a forester, they have a license and a license number. And if you wonder about them, you can go to the Maine Forester Licensing Board, Google that, and you can check their name. But any of those any forester would know how to qualify for either of those programs.
So the next question we have is there a best time of year or season for writing a plan? The short answer is no. The longer answer is yes to certain advantages. If you have a plan written in the spring, summer, early fall, you're going to be more likely to be able to identify perhaps exotic invasive plants on your property more easily. And those can be a detriment to long-term management. Certainly the type, the vegetative type that will lose their leaves and completely dissolve essentially in the winter time, like black swallowwort, you wouldn't be able to identify in the winter. So there is that advantage. I don't see a huge advantage other than that. You could have a plan written in the wintertime. You may miss some certain issues, like maybe there's some soil erosion or stream crossing concerns that you might not see when there's snow on the ground. Or you might miss some seedling regeneration that you might want to know about under the snow. So I think any time prior to winter is probably the best time. And foresters aren't always keen to get out their snowshoes to go walk 200 acres to do a plan. So I would say summer is probably your best bet, or late summer.
I was gonna do a quick poll of our participants. You can use actually a little icon on your on your profile. You can raise your hand if everybody knows how to do that. Just curious how many people in this group already are working with a forester. So either raise your hand on the video, or you can say in chat, I am or I am not. I'm just curious if that's something folks are. I see one hand. So I see another hand. Great. And yes, David. have been, talking about, we talk a lot about finding a forester. I also know that it's been difficult to find foresters who are ready to go right away. But it does, Jeff and Tom, your opinion is that it's an important step as a woodland owner. That's an important practice. It's not a requirement by any means, but it's a very strong suggestion on your part.
It's a good help. It's a good help. There are a lot of people that manage their land without foresters, to be honest with you. And once people become more familiar with it, they probably can do it. I mean, for newer owners, it's really kind of helps avoid some of the issues that you might run up against that someone. I mean, I help people all the time that get calls from people that are looking, gee, I'll promise you this and I'll promise you that. And a good forester can sort through, what you really have and what the value is and what your return should be, and then long-term management advice. So it's a good idea, particularly with the help that's available. To be honest with you, the cost is pretty minimal to get it. And then it gives you a lot of history about your property and what you really have to start with. And you may not need a forester after that, but you've got everything kind of laid out for you about what you have and what you could do and the possibilities on your property and those kind of things. And there's usually a list of things from the forester that says suggestions about things you could do, whether you do them yourself or somebody else does. And that's just good, a handy guide. Would you say, Jeff?
Yeah, I think one reason I say or encourage people to call more than one forester is oftentimes it becomes a long-term relationship. That's somebody who you look to for advice on your land. And oftentimes I work with owners and their children, and more towards like an estate plan or a legacy plan for the land. So it becomes a long-term relationship. It's somebody you become to trust. And you can, if you have a good forester, you should be able to just ask them questions that arise, shoot them an email, take a picture in your lot, say, should I be concerned about this? And that's the kind of thing that you should be able to do with a forester, and just give them a ring if you have concerns or questions. And most don't charge for that kind of stuff. Some might. I'm not familiar with everybody's business plan, but yeah, it should be somebody you're not afraid to pick up the phone and give a call if you have a question.
One of the respondents I saw said they're trying to set a date with their district forester, but they're very busy this time of year. And I'd say keep bugging them.
Yeah.
We do hear, so district foresters are your tax money at work. There are 10 of them in the state. They work, they're the Maine Forest Service employees, and their primary job is to work with forest owners to give them kind of that initial advice and a walk and talk opportunity to get owners on the right track, and to be a resource. And they're the ones I talk to most of them pretty regularly. They're always anxious to get on properties. They want to see what you have. So, and they are also they have no they're not looking for a job. They already have a job, so they're not going to be telling you things to because they want to be hired. They're not out there to be hired. So they're a good resource to give some unbiased opinions about what you should be looking at and things that they notice, and getting you on track. They could even give you some advice on what foresters, or some names of foresters that you could start reaching out to.
Yeah, all district foresters have a good relationship with the consultants in their area, and can give you a short list of the closest ones to you.
And I put a link on the chat, so just scroll around, but there's a link that takes you to the Maine Forest Service page that lists all the towns and which district forester serves your town. So you can actually find the name and the contact information of your district forester, and they respond to emails, phone calls, and they're always, I've never had a district forester say, "Don't call me." They're happy to hear from you.
Another thing I encourage owners to do is get involved in the woodland owner community, as you are tonight. There oftentimes are harvest tours, walk and talks on woodlots. People that are actively managing are very proud to show off what they've done and help you learn from their mistakes, so you don't repeat certain things that they may regret doing over time. And you'll earn knowledge that way. You'll gain knowledge. You'll gain relationships. You'll start to understand some other people's actions and maybe what their goals are, and maybe they line up with yours. So you can take a look at their lot and see what they've been doing. But you'll gain a lot of knowledge that way. You'll start to create more questions for yourself, which will help you manage long term. But that's a helpful thing to do, especially if you're thinking about doing a harvest or your forester's recommended a harvest, and going out and seeing a harvest, seeing the types of equipment, seeing the trail size, seeing the layout, the landing, just what's involved. I think is helpful to get out and see it before it happens on your own land, because it can happen quick and decisions are made, and it's helpful to know that you're making the right one prior to that activity.
I would also say that, a lot of people that own land, they're thinking more about wildlife and what they can do for wildlife on their property, and a forester can help with that. Instead of talking board feed and money and volume, and they can help you with the habitat and improving the habitat. And you can actually, if you have particularly wildlife species you're interested in, we have members that really like birds, and so you can do certain things in the forest, and you're going to enhance it for bird populations. Some people like deer. Some people like any kind of wildlife. I've just never met a landowner that didn't like wildlife in some form or other. Not all wildlife, because sometimes they eat everything, deer eating or shrubs and things, but most people would care about wildlife, and the forester can help with that, not just, but harvesting can be part of what you can do to improve your land for wildlife at the same time, or planting certain things and things like that.
I often tell people that good management, even wildlife management, goes hand in hand with a healthy forest, and oftentimes provides income. It may not be your primary objective, but oftentimes if you manage for healthy forest long term, or wildlife, assuming it's not beaver habitat or grouse habitat or something like that, you'll end up producing a quality forest that has some value to it.
And we do programs, we've done several programs already recently with a wildlife biologist out on the ground, working with going through a property and talking to folks, and as an education, walking someone's lot with a whole bunch of other people and giving advice, or saying, here's something you could do, or here's something you might not have noticed, but this is what's going on here, that kind of thing. So I'd say watch for more of those too, because we'll be doing more and more of on the wildlife side.
Yeah, the biologist is Joe Roy, and he's another one that would love to come and visit your property. And I'm going to post his information on chat as well, because it's a new position, relatively new position that the state has created as another resource for private landowners. And thanks to Maine Woodland Owners, specifically Tom Doak, he spends a lot of time in the legislature promoting and pushing for good policy. And one of them is providing these types of resources for woodland owners, so that you feel like you have what you need and you don't have to spend a ton of money to get that, solid information for managing your land. So, oh, great. Someone's asking about exotic plant species.
I get excited.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a number of programs. The state just developed a new program that is administered through the Maine Forest Service in partner with Maine Natural Areas Program. And they pay for invasive plant management plans. So you got a forest plan, you feel like you don't need another plan, but if you want another plan to just identify invasives and look at what is on your property and how to properly manage them or control them, the state is paying for those, not in full, but pretty good funding rate. And they're also paying for control of invasives, whether that's mechanical or chemical control. And you can find information on that on the Maine Natural Areas website. If you just type Maine Natural Areas in Google, Maine Natural Areas Program, or invasive plants, Maine Natural Areas Program. You should be able to find that information. Your district forester will also provide you with the paperwork to sign up for that program if you're interested. They're the ones that are reading those plans and approving those. Going back to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, they have funding for invasive management plan, or invasive control, I should say, through your forest plan. So if you have a forest plan written through that program and invasive plants are identified on the property, you can then apply to have those plants controlled as a result of that forest plan. And they have a great funding rate also for invasive control. There are some foresters in the state that specialize in those kind of things. I am one of those because I'm in southern Maine and we are absolutely inundated with invasive plants. So out of necessity, not so much desire, I have taken on the role of invasive plant controller through herbicide. I don't do mechanical, but there are professionals around that specialize in that kind of thing. Perfect. Jen's got it down in the chat there. I think it's an interesting point. I just want to say one more thing. Getting out in your property in all different seasons is important too. I know I'm going to keep saying that over and over, but getting out in the spring, invasives are the first thing often that leaf out. So if you're out before native plants, you start seeing things leaf out. Honeysuckle is one of the first. Before you ever think a plant should leaf out, you'll find honeysuckle buds opening up. So if you're out on your property and you see some things that maybe don't look right and they're early leaf out plants, or in the fall, they're some of the last ones to retain their leaves. So if you're out after things are starting to turn color and you see a lot of green in your understory, you may have quite a bit of barberry or another plant of less desirable type. So that's a good way to really help identify those if you're not familiar with them, is they'll be the first in the spring and last in the fall.
I think Marty did you have your hand up? Did you want to jump in? Marty, you're muted, so make sure you unmute yourself. And then we have another question. There you go. Great.
No, I didn't have my hand up, but I would like to go back and have you address just the other part of how easy it might be to get out of tree growth into open space.
Okay. So you can that's great. You can transfer between programs without a penalty. And the way you would do that is if I assume your land is in tree growth and you're thinking about open space, you would, there's a form that you would use that's available online. It's that Maine Revenue Service has it online. I'm trying to remember I can't remember the form. I don't think it has a number. But you can talk to the local assessor and just say, I'm in tree growth. I'm thinking about open space, and ask them, you'd want to know what your rate would be. It could be substantially more if you go open space. So you want to know what it is. So you talk to the local tax assessor and say, what do you need from me if I want to transfer to open space? And can you give me an estimate what my taxes would look like? But you can do that. Now, we have to do those before April 1st. If you're in the program on April 1st, you're in the program for the year. So if you're thinking about transferring out, you want to do it before April 1st. But you want to transfer between one and another.
It's important to note too, you don't need a professional to go from tree growth to open space. Right. You can file that paperwork yourself. And the town should have a copy of that application. Yeah, you don't need a management plan. You don't need anything. You're just gonna have to decide. The assessor is gonna give you a few options that says you're gonna get a reduction in your tax. They're gonna take the full value of your property and figure out what the taxes would be. And then they're gonna ask you some questions about, well, do you want to keep the land open for, people walking on it? And if it is, then you can get a deduction. But if not, you won't get that deduction. And they'll ask you some questions. If you have any questions, give me a call. I can walk you through the form. I can talk to you about the different options, and I do this all the time on current use taxation things for people. So if you've got my
you've got our information, just give me a shout and I can work you right through the form.
I see a number of these people have owned their land for quite a number of years, and I'm wondering if anyone else is taking a fresh look. I have had a forester and it's been harvested once, and now I have walked the land with some local land trust trail managers and there's they're fresher ideas out than there were 30 years ago when all we did was put it under tree growth. Is it foolish to be thinking about taking it out because I don't want it harvested anymore?
No, but you don't want to, if you take it out, it could be a substantial penalty.
Yeah.
And if you don't ever want to cut trees on it, and that's perfectly legitimate, then open space is really a better program for you. And there are, that's a better look, frankly, at it. And you also may need, what you just said would lead me to believe that if you've worked with a forester in the past, you might need you might want a forester that has a different view of the world as well.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I can say that because I'm a old-time forester myself, but a younger forester probably could give you some good ideas too.
I wasn't going to say it, Tom, but there is traditionally in forestry school, there was a lot of focus on board feet, timber production, and that has changed substantially over time. I mean, I would say the majority of the clients I work with are interested in wildlife. They're interested in aesthetics and privacy, and the financial return from a forest is a benefit, but it's not their goal. So I think consider calling some other foresters, talking with other landowners who really like their forester and are interested in your objectives. And you may find somebody with some fresh ideas that has the knowledge in the background to help you. And it may not be cutting trees, that may not be what you'll end up at the end of the day.
So most of the time you pay a forester, foresters get paid for doing a management plan, but they also get usually a percentage of the harvest. And so that's been the typical model. So we have a land trust program we own about 8,000 acres in Maine now that we manage, and we've just started a new system and we're paying for forestry services on an hourly basis. So there is no percentage part of it. So when we want a forestry service on our lands, I'm a forester, but I'm not the dirt forester I used to be. We have a contractor that actually we pay on an hourly basis, and that may be a new model for a lot of people. I don't know how many times I've been on somebody's property and they've turned off by the forester who shows up and says, "That's a money tree. That's a money tree. That's a money tree." When the landowner isn't thinking, that's not what the landowner cares about. They care about the aesthetics. They care about the wildlife. They care about feeling good about their property. It's a place for them to enjoy. And you start talking board feet and cash and money, many of them are saying that's the wrong person. And the forestry profession has not, the newer foresters are much better at it. When I was in forestry school, it was a very different discussion. So you might just need a new forester, but it's a perfectly legitimate if you never want to cut trees too. But tree growth is not the place for you if that's the case.
And I just want to say that Maine Woodland Owners has been around since 1975. And I think this organization reinvents itself probably every 10 years because its job is to keep track of the trends around forestry and land ownership and the policies that support or not support certain things. And so it's great to hear a landowner seeing that as well. And I think that's something as an organization we want to encourage. So the same thing with the district foresters. You've brought them to your land a couple of years ago, bring them back, because you don't know, first of all, invasive plants and invasive pests, that stuff's happening every quarter. There's a new report and there's something new to know. And so you have to make new considerations, and same with the wood market. And it's also just the science that's come out about habitat and wildlife and the benefits that we're getting by just having forests alone. So all of those things together create the big picture that help inform you what you should be doing with your land And it's not set in stone. It doesn't seem to me that forestry is always changing. So it's really great to hear someone talk about fresh eyes on their land, even though you've had it for a long time.
I would say one thing, if for those that have harvested wood, and maybe weren't happy with it, or you're considering it, I would be very clear with the professionals you're working with about what you want. If you don't want big equipment on your property, I think that's an important thing to tell people, because they're working for you. Foresters are working for you, and they're supposed to achieve what you want. So if it sounds wild, but if you want horses on your property harvesting your wood, tell them that. And if they can't find that professional to do that, they'll reach out to others to try and help you achieve that. Or if you just want a small cable skidder, or a guy with a farm tractor and a small forwarder trailer to do a real light harvest, there's some key things you want to achieve, even if it's for wildlife. Then be real clear about that. I think that's something where communication is the most important thing when it comes down to the end of the day in forestry and planning any type of activity on the property, so that the forester knows what the landowner wants. The contractor who's performing any type of work on the property knows what the landowner wants. And all three of those people have talked together and understand each other.
One thing I would say about, as we look at the changing climate and the tree, there's a lot of trees under stress around, for different things. You see, insect disease issues and things, and there's some pretty good information going on about. There are some management activities that you can likely reduce the impacts from some of the newer insect diseases, or it's about having a more resilient forest and a diverse forest. And sometimes that, a little bit intervention can really keep the forest in much healthier condition. So there's some really good research going on about that, and some of the younger foresters would have that information to work on it too. So it's just something to think about as you make the decisions. There is a question in that talks about, sounds like, I think if you switch to the questions about tree growth to open space. I think, yes, it's talking to the local assessor and to start and see what you want to, and see what the impact would be before you do sign up, because it could be a substantial increase in taxes, which is maybe fine for you, but you don't want to get a tax bill that says, wow, my tax bill quadrupled here when I left the single tax law program and went to open space, because it could be substantially more the way the formulas work.
There was a couple questions back before that. One was, any resources for dealing with insects like brown-tailed moth? And I'm not aware of any yet. I think there has been talks surrounding that, but that is certainly something to be on the lookout for and understand.
You can be kept up to date by the Maine Forest Service Forest Health and Monitoring Department, and I've put the link up for their all the resources they offer. But as far as managing brown tail moth, it's really only for the trees near your home. It's not there's no strategy for whole woodlots around brown tail moth.
Landscape projects.
Yeah.
The next question is, how do we enroll in a monitoring program that can help track the spread of disease and pests throughout the state?
That's the folks right there.
One thing,
the monitoring folks. Yeah.
One thing, if you're in southern Maine, or if you're on the edge of a pest or pathogen, you can call them and provide your information and say, I'm willing to, maybe if it's emerald ash borer, say I'm willing to host a trap tree, create a trap tree on my property, or host a pheromone trap, if it makes sense. So you can contact the entomology lab and let them know that you're willing participant to survey for those types of insects or diseases present. But there is no actual statewide program where you can enroll your property in terms of monitoring, but you certainly can contact those professionals if you have concerns.
So all that information is on their website, and you can even send pictures of things you're finding. In fact, that's how the State Forest Service finds out about disease and pests. Sometimes a lot of times, actually, it's private landowners who are observing things on their property, take a picture, send it in. they come out, look at it, realize this is something new or a new spread of some sort. So it's really important. So for monitoring for the state.
So their next question, are you seeing more landowners putting conservation restrictions on their properties than in the past? Absolutely. I think there's a big interest in land trusts, conservation easements, or donating in fee. So if you're, maybe your kids aren't interested in the land and you want to see it stay forest, stay a managed healthy forest. Obviously Maine Woodland Owners is a great organization for that type of thing, donating either at time of death or while you're still living, and working out those details. That happens quite often. I see quite a few clients of mine not quite sure what to do with their land if they're getting older and less involved in the management due to health conditions or what have you. I see them start to really worry about what's going to happen with the land and how it'll be treated, and they want to keep it from being developed or misused. So you certainly could consider a conservation easement, which is giving away the development rights to an organization to hold those and oversee and defend that into perpetuity, or just donating your land in fee to an organization that will protect it. Tom, you want to talk any more on that?
Just that on a conservation easements, every once in a while we do a good land trust program requires on a conservation easement that you provide an endowment fund. And that's a hard thing. A lot of people will say, you mean I'm going to give up the development rights and I'm going to put these restrictions on it, and you want me to give you money too? And these are permanent restrictions, and the land trust is now obligated to enforce those over forever. So it always is a surprise from people when they say, gee, I have to come up with money as well as give my development rights away and things like that. But any land trust that doesn't require that as part of a conservation easement is not, frankly, a viable entity in the long run. And if you really want an organization that's going to look after your property, you have to have the resources to monitor the easement, but also defend it if somebody plunks a house down on it. Because the next owner may say, I don't know about this conservation easement stuff. It's my land. I'm going to try to do something. I want to build a house on it. I'm going to do it. That's the kind of thing that happens. Most of the properties come to us are gifted to us outright with a deed restriction that will only use them for forest management purposes. And they come to us, and then we manage those lands long term. We've got 74 parcels, I think now, 10, maybe 74 parcels. I think.
Yeah. We're in almost every county. And we think
And you should take a look at them if you ever see some really nice lands.
Actually,
on our website and look at our website, look at our land trust program, and go visit some of our properties. They're really kind of really nice, beautiful properties. And
I was just going to mention, it's kind of a wild thought, but it is possible for a land trust, if they are mismanaged and taking land without endowment, to go bankrupt defending an easement. And then those easements will then be given away to another organization who can more responsibly take care of that. But so it is important to research if you are considering a conservation easement, find an organization that fits your goals for the land. But certainly sit down and talk with a number of different people if that's what you're looking to do.
And we can help.
We
can help people find a good land trust. If we're not a fit, we can help people find a land trust it is too.
Absolutely. So here's a comment saying, we switched from tree growth to open space, thinking about forever wild. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, I think you have to have an easement or something written into the deed on the property to be able to qualify for the forever wild part of open space.
Right. You can't declare it forever wild. You need to actually have a legal, something legal that makes it forever wild, meaning you can walk on it and things like that, but you can't manage the property, right? If whatever happens. But you need a legal instrument of some kind that restricts your ability or the next owner's ability, yes, to qualify for that. And it's a percentage reduction off your taxes if you do that.
Who
Do you have
else
any other
who wants to
that's what I was
jump
gonna
in
say.
here?
any other questions?
I always worry when you do these things that we're talking over someone's head.
Mhm.
You know, we get into technical terms and we try not to use words, you know, that the forestry terms that, you know, board feet and thousand board feet and I don't know, units and, you know, that kind of stuff. And we try to avoid those things. So hopefully we have, and we're not advocating everybody go out and cut trees either. I mean, it's your land, you should decide what you want your land to be. We can help you with any phase of that. I mean, but we're not out there saying everybody ought to cut their trees or anything. But if you ought to have fun as a landowner, enjoy your property, and that's really the important part. And that's what we try to do with people. Help them get the enjoyment out of their land and help them keep it intact or keep some of the pressures off it so they can keep it as woodland. So, but we don't make judgments about how people manage their land. It's like, here, you know, what do you want to do? And we'll help you get to that spot or help you find people that can.
One thing I wanted to jump into and say that as much as I was promoting the idea of getting fresh eyes and making, you know, mid-course corrections on your forest management and your ownership, the other side of it is that managing forests is a long game. We're talking, you know, your plan, while it's a 10-year plan, you're usually thinking beyond 10 years when you're coming up with your plan. And Jeff, I know even when you when you work with someone who's new to woodland ownership, you probably ask them to think beyond their lifetime, really, when it comes to planning for their woods. And that means also who's going to be next. Even if you just acquired the land, when you're making your plans, you have to think about who's next and who's going to be willing to take on the management, even if it's not someone in your family and you don't even know who it is yet. But what are the things you're going to want to see happen after you're gone? And so we want to help with that as well. We do provide workshops around it's called legacy planning. And we bring in a financial planner who has some experience with helping woodland owners, think about these things. And it's part of the estate planning process. But woodland ownership's there's a little bit more you have to think about, because you're also thinking about possibly being able to earn a little bit of revenue from your management over those years you own it. And then the way you do it so that the next person's going to continue to see the fruits of the labor that you're going to be putting in over those years. So I want to just mention that as well as part of being a new owner.
Yeah, I want to echo Jen's sentiment there that I have worked, I don't know how many people I've met with that are nearing retirement and beginning to start thinking about managing their land. And I want to stress it as much as I can, start as soon as you can today, if that's the case, because the more you do, the better off you'll be long term, and the better product you'll have to give to family or friends or whoever down the line. It's all part about being a good steward of your property. A couple more questions there. We purchased our land after a recent harvest within the year. How quickly should we be reaching out to a district forester, consulting forester to put a plan together? If you're comfortable with where you're at in terms of knowledge around your property, just exploring it, and you're ready to set some goals, I think you could call anytime. Even if there's not necessarily maybe commercial value, if it was liquidated or they cut a lot of the value out of the woodlot, meaning that there's not many mature trees left, I think it's okay to call a consulting forester or just your district forester and have them walk with you, because oftentimes after a harvest, whether it's a well-directed harvest or maybe one that was focused on financial return, there's activities you can do with a young forest that is developing after a harvest that can benefit the forest long term. And there's a number of cost share programs that'll help fund what they call pre-commercial work on a woodlot, meaning that you're not making any revenue from the work that you're inputting into the land. And there's all types of different activities you can do, whether it be thinning saplings or planting or herbicide to control stump sprouts, all different types of things. But it's certainly worth giving a call to a district forester or consulting forester to see if there's something you could be doing in the short term to invest into the long term on that property. Is there anything new regarding carbon offsets? I'm going to shift this one over to Tom. Tom.
There's always something new on carbon offsets because it's such a quick, it's so evolving so quickly here. And you know, yesterday's news is old news now, but yes, all kinds of things. We're actually going to put together in November in Baldwin, right, Jen? And then
Yep, November 1st.
In December, I'm doing one.
December 6th, we'll do an online version of that.
Yep. So watch for that.
And you know, it may be two different presentations depending on what things have changed between those two events. So
there are a couple of efforts underway for smaller, or most of the carbon market offsets are for people that own several thousand acres. But there are two programs. One's called NCX, and you can Google NCX, and that's a program that pays you to defer harvesting. And so but you have to have, the land has to be available for harvesting, meaning you could cut trees. If you were in forever wild, they say, well, we're not going to pay you to defer something that you can't do anyway. So, but NCX is one option for smaller owners right now. The other one that's is coming to Maine will be here probably early next year, will be one that pays pays you to do certain practices on your property. So that would enhance carbon, and then they will pay you to do certain things on your land and maintain those practices over a period of time. So those are the two that are going to fit some of the smaller ownerships. And then there's new ideas being developed all the time. So stay tuned. If you remember, we'll keep talking about them, but we have the November in-person one to do, and then I'm going to do one in December online, right? And so,
yes.
and I'm sure we'll do more.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think there's already things you can do now just in forest management. The good news is that good forest management, good sports stewardship usually helps your woods capture carbon. You know, the healthier your woods, the more ability it has. So there's that right now until we start seeing new market opportunities.
One of the concepts being developed is also one around if you can grow your trees to a bigger size and produce a product that is long-lived, meaning like furniture and building materials that's going to store carbon anyway, you could get credit for that, as well as creating a growing space so you're taking some trees out, but they're still going to stay in a solid form, and you're creating growing space to suck up more carbon. So there's a bunch of different stuff going on, and just kind of watch it, because the markets are going to change here, are changing dramatically. I see another tree growth question, so let me take that one. About if your land is currently in tree growth, I believe the new owner has to have a management plan, plan prepared by a licensed forester within 1 year. That is correct. You have a year to, if you acquire land in tree growth, it stays in the program. It runs with the land. You have a year to tell the assessor if you want to stay in, and if you want to stay in, you can either accept the current landowner's management plan and just adopt that, or have a new plan. Many people, if you can get the plan from the previous owner, will simply adopt that while they are thinking about what they want to do, and that's perfectly legit. But yes, you need to tell the town what your intentions are within 1 year from when you acquire the property. Most towns are very, very flexible on this issue, but that's what the statute says. Yes.
One thing I would add to that is, if you do decide to adopt a previous plan from the prior owner that you're purchasing from, you will only have the period of that plan until it expires. So if that plan is 5 years old, you'll have 5 years before you need a new plan. Whereas if you decide to have your own written up, it's good for 10.
The other thing we have seen with new owners is they buy the land, they don't realize their land's already in tree growth. So it's on your deed, I've been told, but a lot of times realtors do not point to that part of their deed.
It's not on the deed, it's in the, it's on the documents, the disclosure form,
Disclosure form, sorry.
but not on the deed.
Right, but they are in documents and, but realtors, we're finding that realtors aren't directing people's attention to that. So we have talked to people who have purchased land, didn't know it was in tree growth and had to scramble to comply. So they didn't get penalized. So if you think you might be in that position, you don't know, you definitely should find out. What else do we have? We did pretty well. We got about 5 minutes left. All right, so I'm gonna do a little shameless promotion here. As I said before, Maine Woodland Owners is very committed to providing the kind of support that new-ish woodland owners, even old timers who want a fresh look at their land, provide some ideas and basics for woodland ownership. So we do have a page on our website dedicated to new woodland ownership. In fact, we have a whole section. We have a section on our website. And so I have been posting links on chat the whole evening. A lot of those links are on this page that I'm going to be sending you to, our new Woodland Owners web page. It's kind of what I've been trying to create is a one-stop shop for new folks, kind of like a checklist of all the things that you want to consider. A lot of what we've talked about tonight. It's also a place where I put videos. This recording is going to be on that website. So on that webpage, so people who didn't make it tonight can watch it and learn. And then we also have, like I said, a newsletter that comes out every month, every 20 pages every month for members. And membership is a bargain, $45 a year. And you receive it either in print or an electronic version. And we are working on making sure there's at least 1 or 2 articles Jeff writes in the newsletter periodically that's geared towards the newer woodland owner, the kind of the basics that we know that people need to know. So I'm very hopeful that this has been helpful, that folks who are not members consider becoming members. Don't have to. Our website's available to anybody, but we would love to have you. And if you have any questions, Jeff, read your email address to me so I can put it in chat, or you can put it in chat.
My email is just mainforestmanagement@gmail.com. Pretty long, but pretty straightforward. I'll put it in the chat also.
Did I get it? Okay. And so bug Jeff, he's happy to be.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions too,
And
even if
same
it's
with
not related
Tom.
to me helping somebody on a consulting basis.
Tom is available at any time during, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Our office is in Augusta, and we try to, and it's open for people to come visit us as well. So we're trying to make ourselves as available as possible. And there are no dumb questions. Our website hopefully will answer a lot of your questions as well. Again, mainwoodlandowners.org. And we'll do one of these again. This has been.
Yeah, let me just say real quick, if
Yeah.
there's a topic you want us to cover or
Right.
Maine Woodland Owners to cover, feel free to let Jen know, because we're willing to put together the professionals to answer those questions of something that might be looming on your mind.
Yeah. In fact, I think, Jeff, you did a workshop, and maybe we could do this again, is just developing your objectives and goals, the kind of the fundamentals of what a forest management plan might look like, even just the basics elements of developing those is a really helpful exercise, and getting some guidance, I think would be a great thing. So that might be that. We might have that next. So we announce our programs on our website, on our events page, and we also do an email blast a couple of times a month for our members and our partners. So stay in touch with us. We love to keep helping as much as we can. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
On that note, thank you very much. And we hope to see you again at our next, we actually are doing an invasive pests program next week on the 28th, a lunchtime program. Check our website, Maine Woodland Owners events, and you will find information on how to register. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.